Project 571, genetically engineered vampire created to destroy evil.
What do you want?
We need your help to kill a vampire.
Malleus Maleficario. It was written by a witch. The first witch. Titania.
That was a little snippet from The Witch's Hammer, the first film I ever solo directed, and it's just been remastered and re-released on Amazon. So if you like witches and vampires, then please do check it out. Anyway, let's get on with this week's episode. Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast. This week, I'm talking to producer ZB Siwek. Hi, ZB, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. So, producer, I often end up talking to a lot of directors. You seem to fit more in that producer category. You told me about a film that you put together called Merge, made up from short films. So let's start by telling me a little bit about that.
Sure. So first of all, I mainly work in an executive producing capacity and also as a distributor now, as of a few months ago. But I've also produced some of my own films as well. One of the films that I've more recently distributed was called Merge. As you mentioned, it's a short film anthology. It's a combination of 6 sci-fi films that we've packaged into a feature film, which we've released just a couple of weeks ago. And in the first week of it being out on Prime Video, went to number 6 in the top 10 films on Prime Video UK, which was really sort of nice to see short films up there for once. So yeah, it was a pretty great experience doing that. And yeah, we're currently looking at distributing some more short film anthologies as well.
Right. Okay. So lots of different things to dig into there. So let's start with, because you've got a lot of short films on your IMDb page. So are all of the short films that are in Merge ones that you've been involved in production of?
No. So this is the 5th short film anthology that I've done. There were a couple of previous ones where I was involved as the main producer, as an executive producer in some of those. In Merge, I've actually wasn't involved in the making of any of those films. I was only involved in, I found the films, thought they'd be connected nicely into one feature-length anthology. So I got in touch with the filmmakers. We made a distribution deal, and I've been distributing that anthology.
Right. And do those films, what is it they share? Do they share a common story thread or just a bit of DNA? What's the kind of link between them all?
Yeah, really, it's mainly the genre, the style of film. So, this sort of common theme, it's a sort of sci-fi film, but it's got quite a lot of themes of AI kind of taking over the way that we see humanity and sort of the lines between that technology and humanity blurring. Really, the reason why I've started doing this was to give short films a bit more of a longer lifespan, because most short films don't make any money whatsoever. And that's because they're just too short to monetize. So what I decided to do last year was to package them into feature-length anthologies, distributing them as feature-length product. And because of that, they're able to go to, say, the top 10 movies on Prime Video, which just a short film would never be able to do.
Yeah, no, it's a smart move. And also, it's something I hadn't considered in that if you've got short films that are 10 to 15 minutes long, you might get lucky and those end when that advert plays, which then gets the person watching to then go, oh, I'm up for another, almost like episodic storytelling. Amazon, number 6 on the Amazon chart. What did you do? What did the people behind the films do to make sure it hit that number 6 spot?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of things. So first of all, we went down sort of the self-distribution route in the sense that we got the film onto Prime Video via FilmHub, which we used as our aggregator. I know they kind of brand themselves as a distributor, but really they're more of an aggregator at the moment. And so we use them to get our film up there. I think the way that we packaged the film was really important. And I think that's something when filmmakers think about marketing, they mainly think about promoting the film once it's done, whereas a big part of the marketing is packaging it in a way and sort of positioning it in a way in the market that makes sense. So for us, the 2 main things was the poster and the trailer. And, with both of those, we were really positioning it as a action sci-fi film that could be up there with the blockbusters, and that poster would hold up over there with some of the big blockbuster films. So, one of the short films had a scene where a plane crashes into a building and the building collapses. The CGI was just about good enough that for a short film, they were like, okay, this is good. Let's put that at the very beginning of the trailer. Let's have that, collapsing building right there on the poster. And I think those two elements were one of the things that I would attribute the most to the success of the film and getting it up.
Okay. And how much did you reveal that it was an anthology in the description, in the poster, all that kind of stuff? Was it, because I guess I'm making, and I've done an anthology film myself. I guess my fear when we've done an anthology is that it might turn viewers off. They might go, oh, well, that's not a feature film. It's lots of little films. I'm not interested. Am I making an assumption? Were you upfront about it being an anthology, or did you kind of make it look like a mix between the two?
Yeah, so we use the word anthology on IMDb. I think the way that because on Amazon, I mean, you get the trailer, the poster, and you get to have one sentence description. Like, that's it, right? Like there's nowhere to explain exactly what it is. So I think what we put is that it's 6 stories rather than an anthology of 6 short films, because we knew that with the metadata, if we put an anthology of 6 short films, that Amazon will just kill that project right away, right? So in a sense, I do think when filmmakers are branding their films and marketing their films, you have to sell it. You can't just say this is exactly what it is, or else it will never get anywhere. You have to sell it a little bit more. Like you would never go to a job interview and say, yeah, I'll do okay. Some days I might turn up, some days I might do well, some days not. No, on the interview, you're going to say, I'm going to do absolutely great, even if, you're human, right? So we, in that sense over here, we did the same thing. We didn't say this is an anthology of short films because that tends to put viewers off. Instead, we said it's 6 stories. And with that, we got a lot of negative comments, which I think is like an interesting thing to talk about, because the film from a viewership point of view was successful. It was actually quite successful in terms of the view through rate. So there was quite a lot of people were watching a large portion of the film on average, which was really good to see as well. But when your low budget indie film makes it up to, the front page of Prime Video, people, we were there beating Aquaman and Interstellar in the top 10 charts, right? People are expecting that. And when they see a low budget anthology, the negative comments come in because, they watch it and they're like, I was expecting £100 million blockbuster. This was not it. So you have to be okay sometimes, I think, as a filmmaker with the negative comments. Like your film is not going to be for everyone, but your marketing needs to push it as far as you possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a tough one because if you've got somebody, like I'm really proud of the poster work. We've got a guy who creates our posters. He does really good, high quality posters. But like you say, it is a tricky line you're balancing because you don't want to oversell the film so that people have this kind of buyer's remorse when they watch it because they are expecting something big budget. But at the same time, you've got to get them to click on it. So you've got to make it look high quality enough to get that click through so they start watching it. So just going back to, so you're saying trailer and poster, super important. Couldn't agree with you more. Poster, any tips for that? Any thoughts on how that should look and feel?
Yeah. So the first thing that I'd say is if you're an indie filmmaker and you're not doing a theatrical release, right? You're mainly going just to streamers. I think we need to stop calling it a poster. It's a thumbnail, right? It's the size of your thumb. It's tiny, right? So the first thing that I would say is once you've done the poster, I want you to download the image onto your phone, make it like 1/4 of your phone screen, and then put your arm kind of straight out in front of you with the phone and then see the poster because that's the size that people will see it. Like that's the first thing. When you see that, you will realize that any words and other than the title of the film are not going to be visible. Therefore, you should not put that. As a matter of fact, if you're putting your film up on Film Hub or an aggregator like that, they will take out any text other than the title of the film because they know that decreases the conversion. So that's the first thing. Keep it simple, that only text should be the title of the film. The image on the poster should also be very simple. Don't have like a collage of all the different faces like you see on the, back in the days when like Lord of the Rings was coming out and you had the 12 different characters and so on. It's like, yes, you can do that if you're making the Avengers, but if you don't have 12, massive A-listers, you don't need that. You just need one strong image. And that image needs to position your film in a way that somebody who is your core audience would want to watch it. So if you're making a horror film and you're really, your core audience is people who want like a really kind of like gory or scary or whatever it might be type of horror film, you need to have that picture on there that's really going to get people to watch it. If you have a monster in your film, that monster needs to be on the poster, so you have to put that. But what I'd say is the most important thing is testing the poster, because no one will be able to tell you. Like if you create 4 different versions of the poster, there's no expert in the world that will be able to tell you which one is going to perform the best. But for about $50 to $100, you can figure it out yourself. So what I like to do is run a meta ads test where I run a campaign, put a $50, literally $50, the 4 different posters that I'm testing, which position the film slightly differently. And I see which one, and the end goal of that ad is to get people to give me their email addresses. Whichever one gets the most email addresses is the winner. And that's the poster that I use. So I think we as filmmakers, we need to get more used to this idea of testing those posters. Mm-hmm. So those would be my biggest kind of pieces of advice for people when they're creating their poster.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think the other option you've got, depending on how many subscribers you've got and how big your audience is you could do YouTube A/B testing with thumbnails and see which one they respond to on a trailer. The other thing I would add to that is when you get your poster or your artwork designed, make sure it looks good in landscape, because a lot of the time that might be how it's going to appear on these streaming platforms. It isn't always going to be poster shaped. So you need to have that same magic, simple image, awesome title, but in a landscape framing so that it works on those platforms. So also something else. So you've done a bit of crowdfunding, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So how did you find that? What give us some tips on crowdfunding?
Yeah. So crowdfunding has become more and more difficult. So I did one crowdfunding campaign in 2016 where we raised just over £10,000. Found that relatively easy. Then I did another crowdfunding campaign in 2018 where we were trying to raise £30,000, and we did, but that was a lot more challenging. And then after that point, I was working as an executive producer, as a coach on crowdfunding campaigns for other filmmakers. And I saw that it has become definitely more and more difficult as time went on. There was this one year in 2020 where crowdfunding was pretty simple because everyone was giving quite a lot away to artists because of COVID. Everyone was on their phone all day, so that made crowdfunding easier. But it is getting more and more challenging. What I'd say is for most people who are crowdfunding, they treat it as a sort of donation and almost like a begging exercise, right? Please give me money for my film. And that is a sure way to have a not successful crowdfunding campaign. So instead, I think filmmakers can flip that to really think about how they can add more value to people who are backing their crowdfunding campaign. One very simple kind of like to illustrate how that actually works in practice, an example. The majority of filmmakers out there, their first reward for the crowdfunding campaign for £10 is a social media shout out, right? You will get tagged in a post where, for all the backers from that day. Nobody wants that. Like nobody wants to be tagged in some random Facebook post, right? So what I teach filmmakers who are crowdfunding to do instead is to say, we will promote any link to your IMDb or your trailer or anything that, or your website to your company, whatever it might be, we will promote it on our socials for that £10. So suddenly you're getting £10 for an advert across their socials. You might get a customer out of that. You might get some exposure out of that. And suddenly it feels like, oh, that's actually worth it. Like that's something, I'm getting something in return. So have a think about in your rewards, how you can add value. Like for the, £100 to £500 or dollar rewards, ask yourself, what can we throw in there? Do we know someone on our team who has an Airbnb who can say, I'll give you, a rental of that Airbnb for 2 days that you can put up as a reward, or things that people genuinely really want. Think about it more as what can people buy on this crowdfunding campaign rather than how much can people donate. And I think that's really one of the only ways to have successful crowdfunding campaigns at this point.
Yeah, that all sounds interesting, and I can see how that would work as well. I guess if you had somebody on the team who could draw beautiful pictures, you could get someone to do a portrait or whatever. But yeah, I guess offering them something unique and that's got a higher cash value if you were to buy it, but it's kind of like an in-kind thing, seems to make sense. And I also noticed, so on these, you said you're an executive producer role, and we know from big budget films, sometimes that's a meaningless title. Sometimes that's I'm famous and I want an executive producer role. But for you, what does that mean? What's the exec producer role mean for you?
Yeah, so it actually means quite a lot of different things on the different projects that I've been working on. For short films, I used to run a film fund, a short film fund at CineCircle, where we are actually giving funding to short films. So I was coming on board as an executive producer because I was actually giving the money from the fund. It was from my own company. And on top of that, I was there kind of advising them as well. Some of them were going to do crowdfunding campaigns, or, they were trying to do some self-distribution for their short films. So it was providing money in an advisory role. For the majority of feature films, I come on board as an executive producer to either help advise on the funding process, helping filmmakers look for funding, structure their financing of the film in a way that makes sense, or in the distribution process. So there's quite a few projects that last year I took on that I was just helping essentially consult on the marketing and the distribution, because the filmmakers knew that they didn't want to go down the traditional distribution route or through sales agents and distributors, and instead wanted to self-distribute. So they were bringing me on board in an advisory role to really help them through that process.
Okay, so sales and distribution is a huge part of filmmaking. I wish it wasn't, but it is. So where do you stand with that? And are you advising most people go Film Hub, go self-distribute, or are you sending them to aggregators? What's your plan there?
Yeah, so I always think that if you can get a good traditional distributor deal, that is going to be better. But there are, very, very few of those left. The majority of distributors out there will give you a deal that, whether you realize it or not, means that you most likely won't make any money, right? Even if your film does really well. The reason why I tell filmmakers, if you can get a good distribution deal, to go down the traditional distributor route, is because they just have an unfair advantage over indie filmmakers. Because they have direct relationships with the streaming platforms, they tend to have the premium shelf space on Amazon Prime and on Tubi and on all the other platforms. So if you go via Film Hub, you really, really need to do well just to kind of get onto the level of some of those distributors that they just, it's a given for them, right? I looked recently at the top 100 indie films on Tubi. It was specifically horror films. And out of the top 100 films on Tubi by popularity from the last 2 years, 95 out of the 100 had a traditional distributor, right? They just get, and it's not that they were doing any more marketing, because they don't do marketing. It's not that they had better films or a better cast or anything like that. The only difference was that there was a traditional distributor on board, which means that they got the premium shelf space in the algorithm. But that said, that's meaningless if you have a marketing cap of $25,000 and your film makes $25,000. You will not see any of that, which is why I think the more viable option for the majority of filmmakers out there is self-distribution if they're making, ultra low budget features.
Yeah, definitely. And so you mentioned CineCircle a moment ago. Tell me, what is that? What's that become now then?
Yeah, so CineCircle has been around for 8 years. It started off as just a monthly networking event. Actually, the first ever CineCircle event was the premiere of a short film, the one that I crowdfunded the 30K for. And it sort of grew from there into a filmmaker events company. Then around COVID, we pivoted to an online events company only for those 2 years. And now we're a hybrid of both. So but essentially, we are beyond events now. We run a short film fund. We now do short film distribution via anthologies. We help filmmakers market and distribute their films. But really, in essence, it's a company that helps filmmakers learn the business side of the industry. We help filmmakers fund, distribute their films, and build successful careers in a variety of different ways.
And are you actively looking for short films? Should filmmakers with short films be barraging you with links to screeners?
Yeah, so we have a submission on our website for short films. So if people want to be a part of one of our feature-length anthologies with their short films, they can submit the films on our website. We are most likely going to be releasing or picking the next couple of short film anthologies and the short films for those in the next sort of 2 to 3 months. We're currently got a couple in the sort of backlog, which we're trying to release before we pick more. But yeah, we're always looking for short films now for these anthologies.
Right. Well, you're going to get a few from this, I imagine. But the question all the short film makers are going to ask is, how is that deal with you and the streaming structured?
Yeah. So the deal between me and the short filmmakers is pretty simple. So we take a 20% cut of the sales that we make. We also have a $1,000 marketing cap. So essentially the first $1,000 goes to us, which is there to really for all the different expenses that we've got on our side, the upfront expenses of we need to create closed captions, we need to pay for a premium QC on Film Hub, we need to put together a trailer for the film. We always run a bit of ads for that trailer, posters, things like that. So we've got these upfront costs that cost about $1,000. Actually, it probably costs more, but we've capped it at $1,000. After that, we take a 20% cut, and the rest of the 80% is split evenly among the films. So whether your film is 6 minutes or 16 minutes, whether your film might subjectively be better or worse than other ones, all the filmmakers get paid the exact same amount after that for having their film in the anthology.
Interesting. Right. Okay. So looking back on all the shorts you've been involved in, and now these anthology films and Cine Circle, what do you wish you'd known when you started in the world of filmmaking?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I'd known how to make money from the film once it's done, because I think this is the last part. So it's like, once that film is done, how do you make money from that short film or from that feature film or from that series, whatever it is? Knowing that helps you understand how to successfully kind of engineer the entire process. I think most filmmakers don't understand that. And because they don't understand that, even if they can't get funding because they can't convince investors that they'll be able to make their money back because they don't know how to make the money back because they've never done it. Or if they manage to, kind of get an investor on board, they most likely lose the money. So I really wish that I knew how that sales and distribution part and marketing of films worked earlier on so that I could get to where I am right now quicker. And it's not that I've got all the answers, but at least I know the process so that the film stands a chance. Because for most filmmakers, I sort of come on board at a point where the film is finished and I already know there's absolutely no way they'll make their money back. I can help them make as much money as possible, but they've already made the mistakes in the earlier stages, which means that it's not commercially viable. So yeah.
So then in that case, if someone's about to make a short film now and they're at the idea or script stage, what's your advice there?
So for short films specifically, it's important to note that short films will not make money in the traditional sense of they will not turn a profit. If they do, it will be an absolute miracle, right? Because, a short film might cost $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to make. To get that, you have to win a pretty big short film festival or big film festival within the short films category, like Sundance, etc., Toronto. And because then you can get on the map for short film sales agents, such as What Media, for example. They do, they sell short films, and then you might have a chance at making a profit. But they, a sales agent like What Media, I think they take like 20 short films a year. And they are, you got to win an Oscar basically to be represented by them. So they won't make a profit, but they can make some money. Like most filmmakers, most short films make no money whatsoever, right? There are ways to actually make some money. So what should filmmakers be thinking about? It always helps to have known cast, and actually that is easier for short films than it is for features, because the second you have a feature film, the known actors, they want a higher fee, they need to be there for quite a long time, they know that feature film is marketable and so on, therefore they will charge you a really, really high fee. I mean, I've worked on short films before where there's relatively known actors, for example, like British actors, and they were working for £100 a day, because it's not money thing for them. They want to be involved in that project, and if they're not in the middle of a feature film or a commercial shoot or something like that, they'll say, sure, I might as well keep myself busy, might be a fun project. And a little tip of getting them on board, it's easier when it's closer to the shoot, because then they know they won't be busy with other work, right? If you tell a known actor, hey, let's shoot something in 4 months, they'll say, come back to us 4 weeks before, when we know we won't have other jobs. So get some known actors, but also like know why you're making the short film, because if you're making it to make money, that's it's just not going to work. Know what your end goal is, right? Because I think most filmmakers do a short film and they say, yeah, I want to add it to my portfolio and so on, but they're not being sort of direct enough with and honest enough with their own goals. So an example of this, for example, one of my first short films was called The Verge. It was like an action sci-fi short film. And my goal was I wanted to prove myself as a producer so that I can get hired as a producer on other projects. So I knew that I could, and a couple of writers sent me their scripts for short films, and I was sort of picking which one I wanted to produce. And there was one which was an excellent script, but it was 2 actors in the room, right? And I knew that this film could win an Oscar, and it wouldn't mean anything for me as a producer, because all I did was put 2 actors and a camera operator in the room, right? The director and the actors will get all the glory, none for me. So instead, I decided to make a short film with VFX, with action sequences, with fight sequences, with complex locations, things like that, a rain machine, all these different things to really prove, hey, I can produce a complex shoot. And I did that. And then a couple of weeks later, I got hired by Warner Brothers to produce some of their music videos, because they went, if he can do that on such a low budget, he can definitely produce some of our, music videos. So be intentional with why you're making that short film and what your specific end goal is, because I think that will help a lot.
Lovely. And then what about, so you talked about the beginning of that process. What about, from experience, is there anything you'd suggest during production and post-production on a short?
Yeah. By the way, my main experience is in marketing. It's in distribution. I actually had a career in marketing outside of the film industry for 5 or 6 years as well. So I always look at that, because I think a lot of filmmakers, they can find the information on how to make a decent short film, whether they action that information or not, is another thing. But I think there's a lot of information out there. But I think you've got to, while you're in the shooting process, you've got to be thinking about the marketing as well. And as a director, as a producer, you're not going to have time for it, because you're going to be running like a headless chicken in the chaos that is making a short film. So bring somebody on board who can be there on set, taking photos, taking videos, and doing, all of this content that you can then use for the next year when you're doing a marketing campaign on social media. Like, I think that's so crucial. Have a think about creating, taking high-res images of your actors in their costumes and so on, so that you can use that for the poster images. Like, have a think about marketing ahead of the shoot and who's going to be in charge of that, because you're not going to have the time. You're going to forget, the shoot is going to be done, and you're going to realize I did not take a single video on my phone while being on set, aside from like one selfie. So I think that would be my biggest kind of piece of advice in the sort of production part. In terms of post-production, it's the same thing. Like, always keep marketing in mind, really. I am not going to be an expert into giving advice on how to best edit or color grade a film, so I'm going to stay away from that advice and kind of focus on that marketing aspect.